Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Richard Branson. It's just like doing a radio show, and normally I'm behind a microphone, only this time all of the listeners are right in front of us, so this is going to be a piece of cake and we're going to have a lot of fun. This is so cool. I can't tell you, this has been a dream of mine for many years, to interview Richard Branson, and I'm just thrilled and honored. I've been such a huge fan of yours, as has everyone here. And true to form, you are such a classy act, Sir Branson. I understand that many people have paid a lot of money to be here today, but that all the proceeds from your speaking engagements worldwide go to a charity near and dear to your heart. So in many respects, all of you are contributing to those charities, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate on which charity they're going to, Richard.
No, I'll just say thanks very much for coming. Hopefully, hopefully we can share some interesting thoughts today. But I think that if you are a successful entrepreneur, wealth comes with it, and responsibility comes with that wealth, and you can make a real difference. And so Virgin has one particular charity called Virgin Unite that unites the 50,000 employees who works for Virgin worldwide to tackle some of the major issues in the world. And obviously Africa is a place that just has numerous problems. But a lot of those problems, I believe, are solvable problems. They're not insurmountable problems. They just need, entrepreneurial social workers with resources to resolve them. So the money that you've paid today, that I've managed to extract from the organisers, is going towards a specific hospital that's being built in Africa, which will cater for about 200,000 people in a community that actually don't have any medical services, and so it'll make a big difference.
Richard, when we watch the film and we look at the myriad and compilation of the various companies you've built under one brand into one of the world's biggest and largest companies, in the early years, and you started Virgin, I believe, when you were 20, I'm sure that people were telling you from the sidelines, this can't be done. You could never build this kind of company with this many different entities. How have you dealt over the years with adversity and also with other people's opinions?
Yes, I mean, conventional wisdom will say that, and I suspect any of you who've been to business schools, you'll be taught you should specialize in one area and try not to stray from that area, and that the best businesses in the world are those businesses that stick to their core. And actually, if you look at the top 20 brands in the world, you have got Nike specializing in shoes. You do have Microsoft specializing in computers, or Coca-Cola specializing in soft drinks, and you can't really imagine Coca-Cola Airline. Or but I don't think personally, I think rules are made to be broken, and what we've at Virgin tried to do is to create a way of life brand, a brand that tackles major companies in quite a lot of different sectors. And it wasn't something we actually set out to do. I left school at 15 to because I wanted to start a magazine run by students to try to put the world right. I mean, there was the Vietnamese War going on. I'm afraid, the equivalent of what's happening in Iraq, but in Vietnam. I was against it, and I was, wanted a voice to campaign to try to, to stop it, or have play our little bit in trying to stop it. There was, the way we were being taught at school. You would spend 8 years learning French in an English school, and you'd come out not speaking French, and the way we were being taught was not conducive to learning it. So my principal aim was to create a business that, to create a magazine that would make a difference. And it wasn't going into creating a magazine to make money or to become an entrepreneur. It was creating a magazine, to make a difference. And since then, we've gone into a lot of different areas, a lot of different businesses. Again, not with the purpose of becoming a serial entrepreneur, but because we have seen, I used to fly when we had a record company on a lot of other people's airlines, and the experience was dire. And if you've ever flown on an American carrier, I won't mention Canadian carriers, you'll know what I mean. And so I decided that if you could create an airline that where the staff were actually enjoying working on that plane, and they were actually proud of the tools they were given, and they were proud of the service they were offering the consumers, and it was actually a fun airline to fly, that it might be successful. And so in that particular case, sat down with Boeing and said, like to buy a second-hand 747, and I was the person that had brought the Sex Pistols and a few other bands, so they actually must have thought me absolutely mad. But anyway, they sort of maybe spotted something in me that made them think that we could maybe build a competitor to British Airways. But I also made a stipulation, because I didn't want to bring everything else that I'd built come crushing down if I was wrong about the airline business. I said, look, I've got to protect the downside. I may be completely wrong that there's an opening for Virgin Atlantic. At the end of the first year, I want the right to hand that plane back to you if I'm wrong. And it might mean that you won't make any money, but you won't lose any money either, and we can both walk away from it. So by protecting the downside, I could then just about convince my fellow directors at Virgin Records to let us start an airline. And as it turned out, after the first year, things were going quite well.
That's a very interesting and novel concept, one that I've written down, staff who enjoy working on an airline, and I think that has some marketing prowess. I wanted to ask you an interesting question. I've heard it said many times that adversity is to men or women, Richard, what carbon is to steel. What are some of the biggest adversaries that you've had to face in your life, and how have you overcome them? And you're also fond of saying, never give up.
Well, in business, obviously, there've been numerous adversities, and anyone here who's trying to set up their own business without any financial backing will know just how difficult it is. And for a number of years, there's only one word that really matters, and that is survival, because the difference between survival and there's a very thin dividing line between survival and not surviving. And most people who start in business end up the wrong side of that dividing line, because the bigger businesses out there will try to crush small upstarts. And we had, we were no different from anybody else when we set up our airline. Excuse me, I've got a slight cough. British Airways, set up a unit behind closed doors, and that unit was set up to crush Virgin Atlantic. And they had people illegally accessing our computer information. They then had a team of people ringing up our passengers, pretending to be from Virgin Atlantic, suggesting that that Virgin Atlantic was cancelled that day, and maybe at British Airways we could maybe move you over to British Airways. They had people going through my rubbish bins. They had people. Anyway, the lengths they went were extraordinary. So, any small business going up against bigger businesses are likely to come up with ferocious competition. So, to beat a big business, you have just got to use the strengths of being small. Generally speaking, if you work for a big corporation, it's quite impersonal, and quite often the staff are not looked after well, and quite often the staff actually don't like going to work because they're not treated well. In a smaller company, you can make sure that your staff are looked after well. You can make sure your staff are proud of what they're doing. You can make sure that that they believe in what they're doing, and they work long hours to try to make the company a success. As a small company, you can be more nimble. You can move more quickly. With Virgin Atlantic, for instance, if we want to change all our seats in our plane to better seats, we can do so in maybe 9 months. For British Airways, it will take them 7 years. So by being more nimble, one can move quicker, one can be more innovative and innovate more. So it is possible for small companies. You can keep your overheads lower, so you can actually undercut the bigger guy, and most likely the bigger guys had years of building up overheads that you as a small company haven't yet got and hopefully never will have. So it is possible for smaller companies to beat bigger companies, but you have to be quick of foot and, as you say, never take no for an answer.
Richard, you've spent a fair amount of your life running across the ocean in go-fast boats, hanging onto balloons in altitudes that are unthinkable. In fact, it was raining Richard Branson here on the weekend. You were hanging from a helicopter somewhere. Do you believe that without these challenges you would be who you are today, and do you believe that you can truly reach your goals without being challenged in life?
Well, I think that there isn't a lot of difference between being an adventurer and being an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, you are pushing the limits. You're trying to, as I said before, trying to protect the downside. And the downside as an entrepreneur is going bust. As an adventurer, you're pushing the limits. You want to protect the downside because the downside possibly is losing your life. So you particularly want to protect the downside. I mean, I realized quite early on in life that in order to put Virgin on the map on a global basis, I didn't have the advertising power of our big rivals. So I would have to utilize myself to get out there and make sure that the world knew about Virgin. And I've had a lot of fun doing it, as well as the sort of normal stunts you do when you launch new businesses. So trying to beat the record for the fastest boat across the Atlantic. Yes, we ended up sinking the first time, but we came back and were successful the second time. Trying to be the first person to fly the Atlantic in a balloon. Yes, we sank the first time, but anyway, the second time we were successful, and so on. So, but I think it helped portray Virgin, as a company that was adventurous and was willing to literally, push the balloon out or the boat out, believing in their company enough to put it on the map. Anyway, it's been a lot of fun doing it, and it seems to have worked.
You've talked a lot about living in the moment, and I know that you own a couple of islands, possibly a couple of continents by now. In living in the moment, and I was reading your book, it was very interesting to me that you could accomplish as much as in 15 minutes as many people can accomplish in a month. How have you found a way to make every second, every moment really count?
Well, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I love life enormously. I love people, love meeting new people, love learning, about new things, and I find myself in quite a unique position, and so don't want to waste the position I find myself in. Don't want to waste my time, and I think I'm in a position, I think, to make a difference in employing more people and challenging big business around the world. But equally, about 50% of my time, I think we can literally make a difference in the world on some of the big social issues. So living for the moment is fun, and it makes a lot of sense. And it would be very sad, I think, if somebody got into the position I've got and they didn't live life to its full.
You've often said never do anything in life or in business where you can't sleep at night. Have you ever been in a situation where you were on the verge of doing a business deal or been involved in a business transaction where you felt uncomfortable about it and pulled out, where you couldn't sleep at night?
I think that from an early age, and when I was 19, I had a rap on the back of my knuckles from the Customs and Excise in the UK. and that taught me that sleeping well at night is absolutely critical, and running your companies ethically is absolutely critical. And I hope that subsequent to that we've got it about right. And it is very important, because I think that, the reputation of a company or an individual can be destroyed overnight if you get it wrong.
Michael Eisner said something very interesting about giving people second chances. In your group of companies, Richard, do you give second chances?
Yes, I mean, I think the word family is used by big business to talk about their company, and I'm afraid quite often misused. I remember, CBS Records in New York had a very impersonal company, and people were hired and fired at a moment's notice, and you'd find the managing director was the managing director, or the deputy managing director one year was certainly not there the next year, and so on. But I think that a good company does run its company as if it's a family, and if your son messes up, you don't kick him out of the family. I remember when I was 7 years old, we had a sweet shop next door, and or 6 or 7 years old, and I discovered where my father had left his pocket money, his spare change in his top drawer of his chest. So I went in one day and got some money out, went to the sweet shop, got a big pile of sweets, and Mrs. Avenel rang up my dad and said, "I think you should come along to the sweet shop." And my dad arrived, and she said, "Well, I'm sure you haven't given him this money to come and buy all these sweets." And my dad looked at her and went, "Of course I have." Anyway, it taught me that I've had similar situations with employees where they've maybe stolen a bit from the company and so on, but by sitting them down and talking to them, they've become the most loyal people you could imagine.
You said you don't kick your son or daughter out for what they've done. In my case, I have 3 sons, and I'm thinking, depends on which one. What I'd like to do, with your permission, Richard, is I'd like to open up the floor for questions for you. Is that all right? And I know we've got a couple of runners out there with microphones, so if you have a question, if you'd raise your hand, and we'll try and find you. Here's a question over here in the front, and we'll get a microphone over to you as soon as we can.
I don't know whether we should put the lights on for this, maybe.
Should we turn the lights up a smidge? A spot?
Hi there. My question is that you're consistently innovating, getting into new businesses like Virgin Galactic. Where do you get your new ideas?
The question was where we get our new ideas and for new businesses. Some come from my own personal gut feeling. I mean, space travel is something. I'm old enough to remember watching the moon landings and thinking, I would love one day to have the opportunity to go into space, and assumed that in my lifetime, it would have gone without saying that, having been able to land man on the moon, that NASA would have then moved on to enabling members of the public to be able to experience the wonders of space. Waited a couple of decades, 2 or 3 decades, found that they really weren't interested in sending us human beings into space, and so in the early 90s went out to look for somebody who who could be the best person to build a reusable space rocket commercially that could send people safely to space, and even more importantly, safely back to Earth. And came across Burt Rutan, and space travel. I think we'll be the only company in the world offering space travel for a while. It'll be great for the brand. It'll be wonderful to experience it personally, and hopefully in time we'll be able to bring the price down to enable a lot of people to be able to travel into space. Equally importantly on that one, because we spend a lot of time on clean energy. We're trying to build spaceships that are thousands of times more environmentally friendly than NASA spaceships, because otherwise I think in this day and age it would be unacceptable to send people to space with the dangers that are happening to this Earth.
While we're waiting for the next question, I'm just wondering how long will it be before the Rolling Stones perform on Mars?
I'll ask Mick the next time I see him. But anyway, yeah, I think Mars is a little bit further off anyway.
Do we have another question? Okay.
But the way they're going, they may still be around when we get there.
Hello. Hi, over here. Richard?
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. Just wondering how the festival went this weekend, and will you do it again next year?
Well, apart from one of the headline band being stopped at immigration and told they couldn't come in, which didn't help, I think people had a good weekend, and we had a lovely sunny Sunday. Not such a sunny Saturday. Maybe we should try it in July rather than September next time. But 30,000 happy people were there, and we'll certainly do it again next year.
Richard, while we're waiting for the next question, who is the most influential person in your life today?
Well, obviously apart from the family, I think the person I admire the most in the world, and I'm very fortunate to known him ever since even before he came out of prison, is Nelson Mandela. He and actually his wife are obviously remarkable people, and we're working together actually in setting up an organisation which something quite good may come of it. And basically, he and his wife have agreed to be the founding elders of an organisation called the Elders. And the idea is that initially he and his wife will appoint the 12 most respected people in the world. People like, say, Archbishop Tutu, or people like, say, President Carter, or maybe Kofi Annan when he steps down from the UN, and those people, those 12 people, will be properly funded to look at the bigger issues of the world that presidents and politicians don't look at. They'll think more long term. So, if you'd say take global warming as an example, I mean, I've spent a lot of time the last few years reading about global warming. I started by reading a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist, which put the skeptical side on about global warming. But since then, I've read numerous books and met numerous scientists, and sadly, I think that the world is careering into a catastrophe, and it's a beautiful world, and we just can't let that happen. And it is possible, I believe, to stop it happening. I mean, there are one or two scientists like James Lovelock who discovered the ozone layer, who actually think we've let it go too far and we can't stop it now. But the majority of scientists believe that we can prevent catastrophe. But in order to prevent catastrophe, I believe that we need, an organisation like the Elders can do quite a lot in alerting the world to an issue like that. For instance, setting up an internet site where everybody throughout the world can contribute to what they're doing to doing their bit to prevent global warming. If everybody in this room makes sure you keep your air conditioning units turned off, when you're out of the house and so on, it would start to make an enormous difference. So the Elders will look at issues like global warming. They'll look at issues like AIDS in South Africa. I mean, you've got a president in South Africa who believes HIV and AIDS is not connected, and they've got a health minister in South Africa who is saying that garlic is the way to cure AIDS, and therefore thousands and thousands of people are dying unnecessarily. Maybe the Elders could have a quiet word with the president. There are conflicts that are taking place in the world. I mean, at the time when Israel invaded Lebanon 2 or 3 months ago, the same week Somalia, Ethiopia invaded Somalia, but there were just 2 little lines on the internet. I mean, almost nobody in this room, I suspect, would know that happened. It can be possible for a group of elders to go along and knock heads together quietly behind the scenes and maybe, find out why this invasion has taken place, what the grievances are, and try to resolve it. Mandela has managed to do it on his own, but he's not going to be with us forever. So the idea is to set up this group of elders that can last for hopefully generations to come and look at some of the bigger long-term issues.
I'd just like to point out, this is a topic on leadership, and I think what Richard Branson has done right now is exemplified why he truly is one of the world's great leaders with the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profits, Richard, and it's really spectacular to see that. We have a question from over here. Go ahead, please.
What advice would you give to somebody just starting out in their career that wants to be really successful for themselves, their family, and the world at large?
Well, I think first of all, you can't be successful for the world at large, you can't make a big difference to the world at large unless you look after yourself and make sure that you're successful initially. So, I think that realistically, it's unfair to ask for small, struggling companies to, say, contribute cash to the world at large. They can play their bit in the environment and make sure that the directors are not driving around in big cars and all the things, all the various areas that they can contribute to. But so the important thing is, if you're setting out in business, is you've got to actually look after yourself and your family first, and make sure that you do well and that you're as successful as possible. Ideally, I think since you're going to spend your life most likely building, say, a business or working in a business, it must be something that you enjoy. It must be something that you're going to get satisfaction from. And I'm sure actually getting satisfaction from it is more important than making another $5,000 or $10,000 a year or whatever it is. If you can get involved with something which is your hobby or something which really interests you, I think that that's important. And if you're actually trying to build a business, if you have a passion for what you're doing, you're going to be able to do it that much better. Are you planning to get into business yourself?
Yes, one day.
Anyway, well, good luck with it. Thank you.
Do you have fun with everything you do, Richard? Is that part of your strategy? If it's not fun, we don't do it?
I think it's extremely. I mean, I remember when we started, Virgin Atlantic, the rival airlines put out a press statement saying, what does somebody from the entertainment business know about the airline business, and what chance have we got to survive? I think what they didn't realize was actually, people in life like to be entertained. People like to, like to have fun. And if you're going to spend 80 or 90% of your, 80% of your life in the workplace, it's got to be enjoyable. You've got to, the people who are running companies must realize that the people that they're working with or working for them, this is their life. It must be a pleasurable experience. And at Virgin, we do try to make sure that, we throw lots of parties and that, the chairman of the group makes sure that he's the last home, and that's why I suspect I've got a deep throat today. But if I do go to a party and I'm socializing, I'll make sure I always have a notebook in my back pocket, because if you're partying with people who you work with, they're all going to have ideas. They're all going to have suggestions. And if you just listen and you've got a drink, you're not going to remember it the next day. So, scribble all those ideas down and make sure you address them the next day. And I think what makes an exceptional company over an average company is the detail. On our planes, for instance, I mean, we've striven to get all the little detail right. Even to the extent that we've got these lovely little pepper pots and salt pots on Virgin Atlantic, and we know they're going to be stolen. So, so underneath the salt pots, we've got stolen from Virgin Atlantic. They get passed around various households when they get home.
Am I paraphrasing this correctly when I heard you say you like to party? Does that mean we should fly everybody here to London, England, your place for Christmas? Does that work for you? Or
well, I do have a party for all our staff in England, and it's now got to 80,000 people come, and it's spread over 8 days. So don't come, please. It's a lot of handshake.
Let's try and squeeze in a few more questions. Yes, over here. Go ahead, please.
Sir Richard, I'm interested in the business acquisition criteria that you use. You've mentioned it's got to be fun. What about relationship to your other companies? What about return on investment, risk, growth category, unfulfilled need? What would be your top 3 business acquisition criteria?
Well, as a group of companies, it's extremely rare that we'll acquire other companies. We've planted, almost all the 300 companies we've got. We've planted the acorns and then, put some water on them, and if they start to flourish, we'll put more water on them and we let them grow. But my criteria is, there's only so many hours, in the day, and it's ready to go into businesses where we can make a fundamental difference to a sector, or just a fundamental difference. I mean, I've talked about global warming. Virgin's in a position where we can invest a lot of money in businesses that can tackle global warming. So, so we spent the last 18 months, investing in, building new ethanol plants. We've been talking to iGen in Canada about cellulosic ethanol. We've been investing in enzyme companies to try to, break down the cellulose to try to be able to use waste product rather than grain and corn to create ethanol. We've been developing a new fuel, so a derivative of butanol, which is again a very clean fuel like ethanol, but is more powerful than ethanol. So we will be spending hundreds of millions of dollars of profits we make from our mobile phone businesses and our airlines and other things in developing a whole series of different areas to tackle global warming. And I suspect as many companies who can afford to right now ought to be looking at doing the same thing. I mean, if we can actually, a company could consider, trying to, develop a little, the most efficient solar panels to go onto people's houses that possible, or the most efficient, wind power to go on people's homes. I mean, everybody, I think, in this room knows that they've got to play their bit in dealing with global warming. I suspect that for entrepreneurs in this room, it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue, and it would be something worthwhile. A lot of entrepreneurs in this room considering as a really important business to go into. So it can be, a good business. It can do a lot for the world, and I suspect make a real difference.
Richard, you have a history of doing great things for the world, and if we have time, I wonder if you could give us a brief synopsis of what you did with Virgin during the Iraq War.
sorry, I'm trying to. Okay, well, there's been a couple of Iraq wars. No, I mean, again, I suppose, one advantage of becoming a public figure is that, you can pick up the phone to anybody and you can, maybe cut through and get things done and I happen to know King Hussein of Jordan, and there were quite a few hostages in Iraq that obviously didn't want to be in Iraq, and it looked like America was going to invade. And so we managed to persuade King Hussein to write a letter to Saddam Hussein and persuaded Saddam Hussein to get the hostages released, and then flew in on a 747 into Baghdad airport. No plane had been there for 3 years. It was dark, and the only other plane there was a bombed-out British Airways plane that had been blown up a few months earlier. So it was an eerie experience, but it was the most incredibly wonderful experience when we actually then ended up flying out of Iraq. And so it's there are advantages in becoming a public figure. And there are a few disadvantages, but not many.
A question over here, yes. Up at the front, please, with the microphone.
Hi. Peter Forent calling from Wardell Professional Development. I wanted to say thank you very much for coming into our homes every week with your show a couple of seasons ago. I felt that I learned a lesson in business from every one of those shows. The question is, the person you hired at the end of that, where is he today, and how have you learned from that whole experience?
Well, I had a ball making the shows, and it was a lot of fun, and thank you for the kind words. Sean came and worked with us for a while and has now gone back to run Lovestacks, and we've actually invested in this company, and he's doing great. Sarah, who we gave the $1 million to set up a charity, we've now we're actually launching a charity called Women on the Move in Atlanta in a couple of weeks' time, and basically it'll be to empower women, particularly in Africa, because women actually, particularly African women, I think can help stop the spread of things like AIDS, perhaps more effectively than men, and address a lot of the problems that need to be addressed. And a couple of the other people have also, joined up with us. So we've managed to find 3 or 4 very good people from the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another question from over here? Right there. Go ahead, please.
Okay. How do you approach mentoring your own children in terms of teaching them life skills?
Well, I think I think the key to being a good boss is not that different from the key to being a good father, in my own opinion, and that is, to lavish praise, to very rarely criticize, and if you lavish, we were talking about watering trees earlier. If you lavish praise, then people will flourish, and if you criticize, people will shrivel up. People know when they haven't got it quite right. You don't need to say it. So with my kids, I hope they've been brought up in an atmosphere of a lot of love and a lot of care and lots of praise. And anyway, they're great kids, and so far so good.
And a question from here, please.
Sir Richard Branson, you've achieved so much in your life. Can you tell us who or whom has been an inspiration in your life, and who or what is your driving force to continue to achieve each of your goals?
I suspect my own parents were enormous influence in my life, and still are, fortunately. My mother never sits still. She wouldn't let me watch television as a child. I had to get out and do things, and she would put me on bicycles and make me ride 300 miles to see Granny when I was 6 or 7 years old. she made me do things that she would have got arrested for today. But but anyway, she taught us to stand on our own 2 feet, and I spent the rest of my life trying to keep up with her. So so we've been very fortunate as a family that lots of love and lots of support.
Richard, we're just about out of time. I wanted to ask you, I was in London this summer, and in London this summer I heard a BBC, I think it was a repeat BBC interview with you, and it mentioned your daughter Holly, and they were alluding to the fact, in fact, you were being interviewed that your daughter, I believe her name is Holly, has been seeing Prince William, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm wondering, is there going to be a Branson in Buckingham Palace? Not to start rumors.
Well, I think the word seeing, is as they do in newspapers, is very much in inverted commas. I mean, they're both good friends. I'll end on just an amusing note. Holly went to Prince William's 21st birthday party at Windsor Castle. Actually, I'll switch back a minute. 16 years before this birthday party, Princess Diana named one of our planes Lady in Red, and Princess Diana was great fun, and she was a good friend, and she went into the cockpit, and we were flying over Windsor Castle, and she had Prince William on her knee in the cockpit, and in the days when you were allowed in the cockpit, and she had the microphone, the speaker on, and she said to everybody in the plane, and if you look to the right, you'll see Granny's house. Anyway, so a number of years later, when Prince William was 21, Holly was there, and there was this giant iced elephant with this enormous trunk, and there were boys at the top, pouring shots at the top of the elephant. This is in Windsor Castle, and Holly was kneeling at the bottom, waiting to receive the shot through the trunk of the elephant, and her eyes glanced up to see the Queen looking down at her very disapprovingly. Yeah.
We're just out about time, Richard, but I'd like to ask you one last question. What would your advice be for everybody in this room this afternoon about following their dreams?
Well, I just think that live life to its full. Enjoy life to its full. Don't waste a minute of it. A lot of what I'm sure most people know already, but I mean, get around a great bunch of friends and support each other, and get out there, have fun, enjoy yourself, and thanks very much for listening. Yeah, thank you.
I would like to mention that one of our dreams has been to take the packaging and distribution of fulfillment for human beings to the rest of the world. And if you like Sir Richard Branson's message and Bill and Lance's message and the Power Within, next week we launch Power Within Broadcasting on international satellite, television, and radio. And that's one of our goals, to take this information worldwide. Richard, on behalf of all of us,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Sir Richard Branson, and to all of